to the What Really Happened radio show. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. And we got a lot of stuff to talk about today. Oh, gee whiz, what are we going to talk about? The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, 800-313-9443. Manny's in the control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble. I'm looking at the corporate media right now, and Fox News is running this story about how tens of thousands of Syrians are fleeing Syria across the border to Lebanon. Oh, it's a horrible, terrible thing. They're fleeing. Well, they're fleeing the coming American attack, is what they're doing. And if you think about it very carefully, have you noticed how they didn't seem all that concerned about being gassed by Assad? They just stayed in place. But when the Americans are coming in to save them from the evil Assad, they're running for the borders. So I don't exactly know what Fox News is attempting to sell with this story about all these Syrians who are fleeing into Lebanon. But it's very obvious they're fleeing from the coming U.S. attack, because they understand these attacks aren't clean and squeaky and we're only going to kill the bad guys. They're going to kill indiscriminately. Remember during Iraq, the cruise missile attacks, we were only attacking Saddam's biological weapons factories and weapons of mass destruction. Well, because there weren't any, they were blowing up other buildings. And they hit, in one tragic case, they hit a dairy which was being used as a bomb shelter by civilians and just killed them all. Now, over in Congress, the Senate Foreign Relations Committee is hammering out their version of the resolution for military action in Syria. The House is just starting to meet there. And I'm seeing a very interesting piece of spin going on that you need to be very much aware of. Ever since Obama got the Speaker of the House and the House Majority Leader to come on board, the news is presenting it that this represents congressional approval, and no, it doesn't. Speaker of the House and the House Majority Whip are basically two people out of 535, all of whom have an equal voice, ultimately, in this final vote. But they're trying to sort of already sell the idea that congressional approval is already there. And that, of course, is very, very dangerous here, because they could try and escalate this thing before Congress gets back on the 9th, go to war and say, well, we had the approval of the Congress to do this, really. We have the Speaker, and we have certainly all these people who are held in high regard by AIPAC are signing on to this thing. But more and more observers are looking at the number of members of the House of Representatives who are already cooling on this thing and saying, Congress might not vote this through. Obama may be facing the same kind of humiliating defeat that David Cameron did in the Parliament. Absent some significant change in the situation. We keep hearing that phrase over and over again, which basically means Israel tries again, as they did yesterday, to somehow spook military action. Now, the draft Senate resolution is very limited in accord to Obama's public statements about a limited strike, no boots on the ground, and that is exactly what the Senate has written into their proposed resolution. A 60-day window of operation with one 30-day extension only, and a ban on any ground forces at all. And, of course, John McCain immediately stood up and said, I can't support that. That's ridiculous there. You know, just because Obama says no boots on the ground doesn't mean we should hold him to it. And he's already saying he will not vote for any resolution that does not have an open-ended time frame for war in Syria and which does not allow the option of sending in ground forces. And it basically just proves all the statements about limited strike and no boots on the ground is a complete lie. And remember, we heard the same thing when they were selling us the war in Afghanistan and the second war in Iraq. Oh, it's going to be limited. We'll be in and out of there. They'll be welcoming our troops with hugs and kisses. They'll be throwing flowers at us. All that stuff. And it was a lie then, and it's a lie now. And even John Kerry was just saying, you know, if Syria implodes, I can't rule out boots on the ground. So they're already weasel wording away to basically pre-sell the idea that, yeah, they're going to invade Syria. Full on out. All this talk about limited strike and no boots on the ground, it was the usual to be expected USDA choice bovine excrement coming from the United States federal government. Now, they're already running into a brick wall because the Senate Foreign Relations Committee's top Republican, Bob Corker, is already chilling on this idea of a war in Syria. And he's already talking about delaying a vote in the Senate, if not outright scuttling it on this resolution. So he's already pulling back. And what that tells us is, all of you American people who are calling your Congress critters, faxing them, it is having an effect. Now, I don't know if Bob Corker is up for re-election next year or not, but certainly every member of the House of Representatives is. And that's why we need to focus our effort on them and just keep up the pressure. Don't back off, because the first side that quits in this contest is going to be the loser. So we have to keep it going. But we're already seeing, you know, this media image of congressional approval and, oh, yes, they're going to... It doesn't look like it's going to happen. It's very, very much up in the air. Most senators and representatives, when asked about it, are still saying, I'm undecided. I'm undecided. And the assurances coming out of the U.S. government aren't really helping the situation. Story out of freebeacon.com. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dempsey, can't actually answer what the U.S. objective in Syria is while he was being questioned by Senator Bob Corker. Why are we going there? What's our goal? What's our agenda? And Dempsey, fuzzing around. What's he going to say? We need to knock off Syria so we can get to Iran to restore the petrodollar and force the world back onto Bretton Woods. We know that's a major part of the reason for the war, but he can't say that publicly in Congress. The American people are not going to send their children off to be killed and crippled to prop up ink and paper. So they're coming. Weapons of mass destruction. Syria has a Death Star. Syria is in league with the reptilians from Planet X, and they're coming down to take our brains. Or whatever it is they're going to come up with. Chris Matthews is out there saying Democrats have to vote for war to save the president's face and reputation. I'm sorry, going to war to save reputation, face, so the president doesn't have to look like he was wrong? That's a really stupid reason to kill a bunch of our kids. If the president's wrong, he's wrong, and he ought to live with that. That's what accountability is all about. And, sorry about the buzz. We're having some equipment problems out at this end again. So, that's a big push for what's going on. Vote to support Obama because we can't let him be seen to be mistaken. We can't let the president seem to be wrong. We have to always be right. Have you ever noticed how government in the United States of America operates like a religion? It depends on the belief of the people in the infallibility of the government, and they're willing to go to war so the president doesn't look like he made a mistake. I mean, of all the reasons to go to war, that's a really stupid one. That is absolutely, absolutely a stupid one. But that's the reason they're giving right now. Peter King is out there going on the attack against Rand Paul for Rand Paul's caution about going into another war, saying, oh, that Rand Paul always comes down on the side of the isolationists. There's nothing wrong with being an isolationist. We have problems in this country that we need to take care of first before we head on off and kill somebody else. It's basically what it comes down to. Now, interesting situation. Obama is over there in Sweden on his way to St. Petersburg for the G20, and he's already sort of weasel wording the rationale for Syria. He's trying to get the G20 on board. I don't think it's going to work. Obama's definitely isolated over there, and it's kind of interesting what he's now saying about his red line. We've got to take a break for commercials. I've got to jiggle some cords over here, and we will be right back. Welcome back to the show here, and I apologize to the people on BAM User for all the buzzes and clicks and noise going on here, but this equipment really is all falling apart, and hopefully I'll be able to replace it in the very, very near future. But we're here in Hawaii, on the island of Oahu. We have all this moist, humid, very salty air, and most of the consumer-level products sold in this country act like they're made out of compressed rust. I'm going to go off topic here for a little bit and share a little anecdote with you. Many years ago, I was asked to help be part of a design team for a product for the home fitness industry, little machine. You see them advertised on TV. Get this new little thingy, and you will look like Arnold Schwarzenegger in the matter of just a few weeks here. And I kept pushing for some engineering issues to increase its durability and longevity, and finally the owner said, look, these things are only have to last 25 hours, because 99% of the people who buy a home exercise machine, they'll try it out for a couple of times and then it goes in the garage. We don't need it to be built any stronger and more durable, and that tells you a lot about the American economy. Alrighty, before I get on to Obama and his red line, I'm going to take a phone call here. Jim in Georgia. Aloha, Jim. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, aloha, Michael. I made a sign for my truck. I put it on there. It's 4 foot long for the back of my tailgate, and it says, please do not send our troops to Syria to die for the Federal Reserve. And I hope more people do that.
I want a picture of that to post at my website.
Well, okay, well, I guess I have to have my son do it because I don't deal with computers and that, but...
Okay, yeah. But I'll blur out the license plate. I promise I'll pixelate the license plate, but I would love a picture of that to put up at the website.
More people need to do that. We don't need to send our kids there.
No, we absolutely don't. We absolutely
Thank you,
do not.
Michael.
All right. Now, Obama was out there last week talking about, Assad has crossed a red line, Assad has crossed a red line. And I still think Obama is looking for an exit strategy here, which he can get if Congress does vote down the war resolutions, which is looking more and more likely, so keep up that pressure. So he's over there getting ready for the G20, and he's out there. His new spin is this red line in Syria, it's not my red line. This is the world's red line. The world set the red line with all these treaties, the Chemical Weapons Convention. And so it's your red line, and your credibility is at stake if we don't go ahead and bomb the crud out of Syria. Now, if the world set the red line regarding chemical weapons used against civilians, why didn't the world bomb the United States after the U.S. government gassed that church full of women and children down in Waco, Texas? If the world set the red line, then why didn't the world bomb the U.S. after the U.S. government used white phosphorus against civilians and civilian residential areas in Fallujah? If the world set the red line, then why didn't the world bomb Israel after Israel used white phosphorus against civilians and residential areas in Gaza? Seems like Barack is very selective in his red lines here. So he's out there saying, it's your credibility at stake if we don't go to war in Syria. And I think the rest of the world at this point is still very firmly saying, are you kidding us? Are you kidding us? Putin is out there, of course, he's at the G20 as well, saying justifications for using force against sovereign countries are unacceptable. Anything the U.S. does in Syria has to be considered an aggression, and he's absolutely right for several reasons. One, there is nothing in international law that says one nation has the right to invade another nation because of something happening inside its borders. The only exception to that is if the United Nations Security Council says, yeah, we have to go in and take care of this humanitarian disaster. Second, Syria has never signed the Chemical Weapons Convention. So they're not in violation of any treaty, even if Assad did use sarin against his own people, and I think it's a ridiculous idea to begin with. Third, the reports we are getting out of Syria is it wasn't sarin anyway, it was chlorine gas, which is very easy to manufacture. It's consistent with those bags of caustic chemicals the rebels were getting from Saudi Arabia, and it explains why the people treating the victims of the attack were not wearing chemical weapons suits. Because you don't need those suits to treat victims of chlorine inhalation, but you do need them if you're dealing with sarin. And by the way, chlorine gas isn't even on the list of chemical weapons in the Chemical Weapons Convention. It's just not considered that big a deal. By the way, another video has surfaced on YouTube showing the rebels with these barrels of chlorine gas firing them at Assad's forces here. Newt Gingrich has gone public saying that we have to vote down this war in Syria. It's a bad idea. He's saying the United States has bigger challenges to deal with, and he's absolutely right. We're a nation with an economy on the edge of collapse. We're a nation that has lost its moral leadership in the world. We've lost our manufacturing. GMO has made an absolute desert of our agricultural exports. Our trade imbalance is going through the roof right now. Nobody wants to buy anything the U.S. is selling anymore. And even some of the most diehard supporters of U.S. government policy on anything are starting to come back and say, no, we're not going to do this. Michael Savage was out there saying we're living in a dictatorship. It's really a one-party system. And we don't really have any identifiable national interests in Syria. We do, but they're all financial. Federal Reserve here. The other day, of course, Rush Limbaugh was out there conceding. It looks like this whole gas attack was a frame-up. Now, Jon Stewart, on his Daily Show, did a funny bit of reprising all of these people saying, oh yes, Syria, weapons of mass destruction, Syria, weapons of mass destruction, and of course reminding everybody these were the same people saying the same thing about Iraq's nuclear weapons. And I can't repeat what Jon Stewart said on the air because I don't have a bleep button and we don't want to lose the license on this radio transmitter. But you need to go over and look at the replay because he just absolutely nailed it. Now, the White House is out there, again, trying to push this idea we have to attack Syria to protect Israel. If we destroy Syria, it will protect Israel against that evil Syrian aggression. Syria is not going to attack Israel. Nobody's going to attack Israel. Israel is now, admittedly, the sixth most powerful nuclear power on Earth. Nobody's going to attack them. They have somewhere between 300 and 600 deployable nuclear weapons, including those nuclear-tipped cruise missiles on those Dolphin-class submarines they've been getting from Germany. It is ludicrous to suggest that Israel is somehow just sitting there, defenseless, waiting to be invaded after the U.S. taxpayer has been forced to give Israel 4 times the entire cost of the Apollo moon program for defense. And Israel's facing a very difficult problem because they're out there trying to push this war in Syria, and at the same time they're trying to delink from it publicly. They're trying to stay behind the scenes and remain unseen. They're not doing a very good job at it. Story over at Aleppo News where saying the Israel lobby and the organized Jewish community want regime change in Syria. And that is, again, a reason why I think Israel tried to spook Syria into an overt military action yesterday with the launch of those missiles. To get Assad to do something, to push the button, to shoot at the U.S. fleet. And thankfully Assad did not fall for it. Because he isn't stupid. I got a lot of hate emails and messages and posts on Facebook and say, yeah, Assad's not stupid. Isn't it? He's a moron. No, he isn't. He might be a self-centered, narcissistic megalomaniac, like world leaders tend to be, our own being a classic example. But nobody gets to that position in the political structure without having most of their marbles still intact. Going to take another break for commercials. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the show, and I'm watching here on Fox News where they're talking about the crisis in Syria, and actually the crisis is in Washington, D.C. That's where the crisis is. Syria's got nothing to do with it. They were showing that wonderful clip of John Kerry going on with his, hi, welcome to Big John's used war lot. Just sign your child's name to this enlistment form, and you can drive this pre-owned war right off the lot this very afternoon. And there were some people behind him holding up their hands, and they were painted red, blood red. And it's very obvious that the Obama administration is working very, very hard to overcome public opposition to the war. And I'd like to remind Mr. Obama of a previous Democratic president, Harry Truman, who said, the will of the people is the law of the land. Because that is what the United States is supposed to be about. That's why the Constitution begins, we the people. That's why the Declaration of Independence says, governments derive their just power from the consent of the governed. You do not have our consent for another war for the bankers. You don't. By the way, we're getting this whole thing again about, oh, the war will stimulate the economy, the war will stimulate the economy. No, it doesn't. That's a complete lie. Yes, when there's a war, there's a whole bunch of money floating around and all that. It looks really good, but it's all borrowed money, borrowed at interest. And in the years after the war, the decades, the century after the war, it has to be paid back with accruing interest. It's not good for the economy. It's destructive of the economy. Because all that money is spent and it doesn't produce saleable products. It doesn't. It's just, they should just pile it all up and set it on fire for all the good that it does for the economy. Now, as I mentioned earlier in the show, Russia has now officially issued a warning to Israel regarding the launching of test missiles, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, say no more, over the eastern Mediterranean, saying that they're playing with weapons in a volatile region without a prior warning risks triggering outright actual combat. And I think that's what Israel is trying to do. You always announce missile tests ahead of time to give civilian shipping and civilian aircraft time to get out of the region. That's what you do. I am absolutely convinced that Israel fired these missiles towards Syria. That's what the Russian radar says happened. The rockets were flying towards Syria, and I think Israel was trying to spook Assad into an overt military action, which would completely do an end run around whatever Congress is going to do with the war resolution. Say, the war is on, let's go. Just going to kickstart that war without risking the embarrassment of a vote down by Congress. And I think that's what Israel is trying to do, and they will try again. You can guarantee it. They'll come back and try to do something again. And Russia obviously knows that's what they're doing. Syria, thankfully, knows that's what they're doing. We know that's what Israel is doing. Putin went even further, just saying John Kerry is lying to Congress. Gee, you think? There's a study in foregone conclusions. Now, they're really starting to scrape the bottom of the barrel on the propaganda. Because while he's over there in Sweden on his way to St. Petersburg, Obama made a point of trying to draw a parallel between the actions of a Swedish diplomat named Wallenberg, who went out of his way to try and help Jews escape from Nazi territory during World War II, and what Obama wants to do in Syria to help their people. Their people. Yes, I'm just like Wallenberg. I'm saving the Syrian people from an evil tyrant. It's a bit of a reach. John Kerry is also playing that same card, equating Assad's presumed, accused, propagandized chemical weapons attack against his own people with the Holocaust. Now, it's kind of interesting because normally whenever anybody around the world equates a particular tragedy with the Holocaust, Israel will stand up and scream, no, that's our trademarked word. You can't compare anything to the Holocaust. That was a unique moment in history. We suffered more than you, and you can't use it. But in this case, with Kerry using the Holocaust to try and push for war in Syria, Israel is rather strangely silent here. Now, they're still out there basically screaming over just what chemical weapons was used. And I think the reason Kerry is pushing sarin is because it is covered in the Chemical Weapons Convention. And they're out there saying the UN will confirm that it's there. And that means Assad did it. And, of course, that is a complete logical fallacy. Even if they find traces of sarin at the site, it doesn't show who launched the attack. And the rebels have been caught with sarin previously. Kerry's logic, and apparently he thinks you, the American people, are stupid enough to fall for it. But his logic is operating on the same level as claiming that rain is caused by invisible magic elves, and then pointing to the rain as proof the elves are real. That's exactly what they're doing. They're saying, Assad used sarin, and if we find sarin, it proves it was Assad. No, it doesn't. That's completely illogical. Now, again, reports we're getting from within Syria itself is that the actual chemical used was chlorine. And earlier in the year, the Syrian government did confirm rebels had seized control of a chlorine processing factory near Aleppo. And that would explain why the people who were photographed helping the victims in Syria weren't wearing special biological chemical warfare suits. Because you don't need them if you're treating somebody for chlorine inhalation. But you have to have them if you're treating somebody who's been contaminated with sarin, because that'll leap off the victim onto the caregiver without isolation suits. So they're still pushing this as hard as they can. They're waving the flags. Now let's see, chlorine, saline here. Now, I want to mention something here. As I said many, many times before, one of the best ways to tell if you're being lied to is look for what should be there and isn't. Now, the official story is Assad was stupid enough to invite in chemical weapons inspectors, and on the day they arrived, launch a chemical weapon attack against women and children and his own soldiers right in front of the inspectors. And it doesn't really make any sense. And the part that should be there and isn't is, what was Assad's motive? What does he gain with such an attack? What military objective is achieved gassing women, children, and his own soldiers? None. There isn't. Assad gains nothing politically by staging a chemical attack in front of the UN inspectors. NATO estimates right now that 70% of the Syrian people are supporting Assad. Assad is not going to risk alienating that public support with a chemical attack on women and children, especially an attack that serves no military purpose and only opens the door to U.S. invasion. Got to think, people. Use that brain. It makes the government nervous when you start thinking and stop believing. Have to believe the U.S. government is telling you the truth. Trust us. Yes, we lied to you before, but trust us, we're telling you the truth now. I don't think so. Alrighty, we were hearing the other day that the first acknowledged CIA-trained mercenary force had entered Syria from Jordan, and apparently they didn't get very far. They've been hammered flat. Jordan has now placed their Air Force on high alert. Jordan has already said, you will not use our territory for any more attacks against Syria. Apparently, in an article, Larry Summers and the Secret Endgame Memo, Greg Palast documented this late 1990s plan devised by Wall Street and the U.S. Treasury to open global banking to the lucrative derivative business, which we've seen what a wonderful blessing that was for the people of the world. And in order to achieve it, they had to have the relaxation of banking regulations, not just in the U.S., but around the world. And that was another agenda that was being served by conquering these countries and say, you will run your banking systems the way we run our banking systems, to turn your national economy into another giant open-air casino for the big money boys to play with. That's what they're asking you to send your kids off to be killed and crippled for. Ink and paper. Quatloos. Ron Paul is out there saying regarding Syria that he smells Iraq all over again, and we all do. It is a pungent odor wafting out of Sodom on the Potomac, the U.S. capital city that was, ironically enough, maybe appropriately, built on a malarial swamp. All right, we're going to take a break for commercials, and we will be right back. Hi, America. Welcome back to the show, and I'm going to take a moment here out of the regular news coverage to mention that Republic Broadcasting is once again going into a pledge drive. And the reason is very obvious. I know you're sick and tired of me always asking you for money, and I'm sick and tired of having to ask you for money. But the big bucks are all with the people trying to sell you World War III, and we need your help to talk them out of it, is basically what it comes down to. And we all know what the economy is like. We all know that the big money is going to war because they think it's going to make them even more money. And one of the reasons they're trying to suck all the money out of the ordinary people is to limit our ability to fight back against the war agenda. And so we're really struggling here. As you heard earlier in the show, we're working with very old, outdated equipment. It's always on the verge of failing. We're always having to repair that in our copious amounts of free time here. And I normally don't talk about this because it only seems to encourage them. But there is a lot of this covert, undercover, backstab activity directed at the independent media. Now, I don't know about Republic Broadcasting, but over at whatreallyhappened.com, we've had people calling our advertisers and threatening them to pull their ads from our website. Back when I was still producing TV commercials, we had somebody from Israel was calling all the ad agencies in town and saying, oh, you don't want to have these people produce your commercials. Yes, they're doing wonderful work, but he's an anti-Semite. And trying to wreck us financially that way. We don't get big corporate checks from companies like Monsanto for reasons that should be obvious. We're not getting huge checks from shadowy non-governmental organizations that come in with strings attached to them, saying, we'll give you $5 million for your brand new studio as long as you don't talk about X, Y, Z. And, of course, our function here is to talk about X, Y, and Z. So we really do need your help. And I know it's hard for us to ask because I know you're just getting by the same way that we are. We really are. But we've had some recordings made by some of the people who do support Republic Broadcasting, and I'd like to play one of those for you right now.
Hi, G. Edward Griffin speaking. I'm author of The Creature from Jekyll Island. And I want to add my voice to the many others who feel that the Republic Broadcast Network is a really essential part of the battle for liberty. Because before we can restore liberty to this country, we've got to have an awareness on the part of the American people, and that awareness is not coming through from the mainstream media. So we need Republic Broadcasting every day in our lives. The best way to help, a lot of people want to be activists, but they're too busy with their lives. They've got a family to raise, a job to perform, and they can't get out there and do what they want to do. But if you're looking for something where you can really make a difference and it doesn't take a lot of time, I hope you'll consider just making a donation to Republic Broadcasting Network. It's easy to do, and you'll be glad you did. They take donations over the phone and on the Internet. So if you want to participate in this, and I hope you do, go to republicbroadcasting.org and make your donation. You'll be glad you did.
All righty. So, and it is that important. The other side likes to play dirty. They're very, very scummy. In fact, as you're probably already aware, my wife, Claire, is a composer, and she writes music which for the most part is not political, not biased. They're not pushing an agenda. We've heard from publishers and choir conductors that they're being told by some of their financial backers, who are usually tied in with Israel, don't you dare publish or perform her music. Her husband is bad. Her husband is evil. And it's just sort of a reminder of how dirty the other side likes to play. We're literally at a threshold. The Wall Street money junkies, the U.S. government, Israel are trying as hard as they can to push us over that cliff into a full-on world war. And we here in the independent media, Republic Broadcasting, we're working as hard as we can to stop this. Because nobody wins in a world war except those bankers. And I don't think there is anybody in the United States of America, whose life is worth less than all the money junkies' money. It's just not worth it. Our young people's lives are worth more than a barrel of oil or another war loan or a war bond or any of that stuff. But the people in charge of this country right now, they're seriously mentally ill. You have John McCain and Lindsey Graham are out there ready to vote support for another multi-billion-dollar war into Syria. These are the same two guys who voted against aid for the Hurricane Sandy victims because, it's too expensive. We can't spend money on the American people, no matter how much they're suffering. It's more important we spend money on war because we'll get richer off the war. And that's really what it's come down to. And so we really do need your help, because the only way we're going to get that big money influence out of our government and our corporate media is for the little money to all unite together. And like I said, I know you're tired of hearing about all these calls for donations. I'm tired of having to say it, but it is that serious. We're at the brink, and now's the time for the big push, both with the donations and screaming at your members of the House of Representatives. Whether we'll go into a full-on nuclear global war or not is going to be decided in the next few weeks. It is that serious here. All right, we're going to grab a phone call. Aaron in Texas. Aloha, Aaron. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, I just had a question. After watching yesterday's Senate debate, I noticed that Ron Paul was and John Kerry, when they were having the conversation on the war in Syria.
Rand Paul.
Yeah. I saw that Rand Paul really didn't draw out the truth like Ron Paul is doing right now about talking about who was the one that used the chemical weapons. I never heard Rand Paul ask or even question who used the chemical weapons. He was pretty much citing the fact that Assad did use it. he was saying that was good was that, you know, going into that war would end up leads to more wars. And I just wanted to know what was your view on Rand Paul, him personally as a congressman.
Well, he's definitely not his father's son. He definitely is more into playing the game rather than standing on principle, which was the hallmark of his father's political career. But everybody, pardon me, everybody within Congress and the corporate media is trying to frame their arguments for and against the war in Syria in terms of what they think the public may be believing. You know, what is the public ready to hear? And so they have crafted this whole illusion about Syria and Assad, and Rand Paul, I think, is considering his own re-election chances if he stands up and says, I don't think Assad did it, I think it was Israel or the U.S. or somebody else like that, because he still needs to play the game in the context of what everybody else's assumptions are. Now, that's the coward's way out, but he is a career politician, and he has come up far short of the high standards set by his father.
I do notice that he does support, unlike his father, he did support foreign aid to Israel, and maybe not as many countries as most senators, but compared to, to Israel, you know, just to show you that I thought that he was probably just being run by Israel, just like any other congressman or.
Well, I think most of Congress, to one extent or another, is being influenced by Israel. I mean, there's all the contributions from AIPAC. There are the AIPAC lobbyists. It's just an obscene number of lobbyists for every member of Congress. Plus, again, we need to take a close look at who it is who are staffing those congressional offices and who they are working for, because they're in a position to control what the members of Congress are actually able to see. Once you're in Washington, D.C., you're actually very much dependent on your congressional staff to tell you what's important today, what's not important, what the polls are saying, and again, those congressional staffers are in a position to wield a tremendous amount of influence over policy, and they're not elected, they're not subject to any kind of civilian oversight. Supposedly the member of Congress is supposed to be watching his staff, but again, we don't know what allegiances a lot of these people have. Okay?
It's a big game to pretty much all the politicians, huh? And it's going to cost many people's lives, but okay, thanks a lot, Mike, for doing your best out there, and I'll go ahead and try to do mine and start sending a little money out here in Denver.
All right, thank you very much, and thank you very much for the donations here. One of the reasons the Founding Fathers decentralized power in the United States was to make it hard for special interests to influence the nation. When it all got concentrated in Washington, D.C., it just turned into a one-stop shopping center for all the corrupting influences on Earth. We'll be right back after Phyllis Shopley. Hello, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. And I want to start off this hour with a trip down memory lane. 23 years ago, the United States government sold the American people with the first war in Iraq, Operation Desert Storm. And they did it with this spectacle of a supposed Kuwaiti nurse testifying at the United Nations how those evil Iraqi soldiers had raided a hospital in Kuwait and stolen all of the incubators, leaving the premature babies on the floor to die. And it was a horrific story, and the girl who was presenting it was crying and just tearful, and the media carried out, oh, what inhuman monsters those people of Iraq are. We have to invade and teach them what for. And, of course, we now know that story was a complete fraud. It was a fake. The girl was not even a nurse. She was the daughter of the Kuwait ambassador. The whole thing was ginned up by a public relations company, Hill and Knowlton, which counts the United States federal government as one of their largest clients. Remember what I said before during the pledge drive about how the big money is going to the liars? This is a classic case. And we need to go back and look at all of those lies that were used to sell us these wars, because they're using lies to sell us this one. Now, in the run-up to Desert Storm, the United States got the cooperation of Saudi Arabia by showing them photos of Iraqi armor lined up on the border, ready to invade Saudi Arabia. in a heartbeat. And that one fell apart when the St. Petersburg's Time in Florida went out to one of the commercial Earth imaging satellites and took pictures of the same area that day and showed there was nothing at that border. Empty desert. So time and time again, we see how the U.S. government, aided by the corporate media and public relations firms and Photoshop, create a pretext for war that is a complete, absolute fantasy, and they're doing it again right now. It is absolutely beyond belief that Assad would invite in chemical weapons inspectors and then stage a chemical weapon attack right in front of them against women, children, and his own soldiers. There's no reason for him to do that. He's already winning against the hired mercenaries with conventional arms. He has no reason to resort to chemical weapons and every reason not to be using them. And apparently the government of the United States of America actually really believed that all of you out there listening to this broadcast were stupid enough where you would just believe it. Because those big multi-million-dollar paid talking heads on the corporate TV news said, oh yes, Assad did this. Absolutely. You should believe us. You should never allow belief to make your decisions for you. Use that brain that you've got. Think it through. Ask if it makes sense. Look for what should be there and isn't. Why would Assad do it? Where's his motive? That's the missing piece. Why would he do that in front of the inspectors? It serves no military objective. It certainly doesn't gain him any political advantage. It just doesn't make sense. And Washington, D.C. actually thought you were not going to think of that. Because after all, you're all loyal Americans and you wave that flag in front of your eyes until it forms a blindfold. And you won't dare think about other points of view and other explanations. That's what Kerry is relying on right now. If we find sarin, it proves it was Assad. No, it doesn't. It proves there was sarin. It doesn't say who used it. Now, speaking of the corporate media, there's a big scandal. This is all over the internet and all over the independent media, how the New York Times published a report mentioning how great an influence AIPAC was in terms of this push to the war in Syria. In fact, they described them the 800-pound gorilla in the room, screaming, we want war, we want war, we want your kids to fight it, but we want war. And they deleted it because Israel's goal is to get this war going without looking like they're in any way, shape, or involved. Now, the Boston Globe had the original New York Times article, and apparently nobody called them up because, as of the last check, their version still had it where AIPAC is the 800-pound gorilla in the room trying to send off Americans against Israel's enemies yet again. Remember that Carl Cameron Fox News 4-part story on the Israeli spy ring and its links to 9/11, where a U.S. government official admitted there was evidence linking those arrested Mossad agents, the dancing Israelis, to 9/11, but that evidence was classified by the U.S. government. Now, it was AIPAC that went to Fox News and said, you got to take that off your website. And Fox News said, yes, master, and they pulled it right off. And then they went out and sent their legions of lawyers out there to every website that had the video saying, you will take that down. That's our copywritten property. Which, of course, doesn't work in the age of the Internet. The videos are still all over the place, and you can see them. By the way, earlier today, I was responding in the forum over at CNN, saying, look for what should be there and is not. What was Assad's motive for doing this chemical weapon attack? What reason would he have? What military objective did it serve? What political objective did it serve? And the answer is none. That's the missing part that reveals this is all a lie. CNN deleted that comment with no explanation. They're terrified that Americans are actually starting to think. They're using that little gray, wrinkly thing up there inside the skull. And that is the death of any government that rules through lies, fraud, and deception, for the people to start to think, oh my goodness, we can't have that. Our whole educational system, our whole socialization structure is to get you to believe as you are told to believe and act on that belief. I remember back when I was still teaching and I noticed how history is taught in the schools these days. Name, place, date, name, place, date, name, place, date. In 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue, and the students walk out of the history class thinking that because they can recite names, places, and dates, that they understand history, and they don't. Because what history classes are not teaching in the public schools is cause and effect. That history is not a series of isolated little incidents to memorize, but is this constant intertwined dance of cause and effect. Because if you learn how to see cause and effect in history, you will be sensitive to cause and effect in current affairs. And they don't want you seeing that. They just want you believing, and you're raised to allow beliefs to control your thinking. Believe in the fat man at the North Pole, you'll get toys. Belief in the rabbit at Easter, you'll get candy. Don't think, don't question how absurd it is. Just believe, and you shall be rewarded. But the hue and cry across the globe, and even into some parts of the corporate media now, against this insanity is just growing, and it has to keep growing. And again, please, every single day, new fax, new email, new call to your House of Representatives and say, look, you're up for election next year. And I and everybody I know are going to decide whether or not to vote for you again based on the war vote. There are no other considerations. We're not interested in hearing about abortion. We're not interested in hearing about race relations. We're not going to be distracted with gay marriage or any of that other frothy, fluffy stuff that you throw at us every election season. How you vote on war for Syria determines whether or not you keep your job. Article out of the NewAmericanEmpire.com. Attacks against Syria, another illegal war based on manipulation and false pretenses. And they're absolutely right. This is where the U.S. government's career of mendacity is catching up with them. Because we know about how Desert Storm was sold with the fake Kuwaiti nurse. We know how the Iraq War was sold with claims of weapons of mass destruction, nuclear bombs. And we know that this nonsense that Assad gassed his own people in front of the UN inspectors is equally nonsense. We'll be back after these commercials. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And apparently during his press conference over in Sweden, Barack Obama was asked by one of the Swedish reporters if his Nobel Peace Prize presented any kind of a dilemma in his rush to war with Syria. So there's a journalist with some spine. Anyway. Story out of the Christian Science Monitor. They're getting involved on this. They have been talking to chemical weapons experts who concur that what is seen in those photographs of the victims being helped is not consistent with a sarin gas attack. That either those pictures were faked or the gas that was used was something other than sarin. And again, we're getting all these other reports that it was actually chlorine. Another story out of SOT.net. This whole Syria gas attack story has a whiff of Saudi-U.S. war propaganda, and to that I would add Israel, because Israel is very much out there with their lobbyists and AIPAC saying, yeah, you got to go have the war. We got to have the war here. You got to fight it. We got to have the war over here. It will protect Israel. Israel doesn't need protection. They got nuclear weapons. BBC got called out again for their management telling all of their people to just, soft pedal on Israel. Israel's good, everybody else is bad. So the corporate media bias is demonstrably on display. And, all this propaganda works if people are not aware they're being propagandized. The lies work only if people are convinced they're not being lied to. And when you have the population of planet Earth, and certainly that of the United States of America, now well aware that government and the corporate media are lying with every single breath, the propaganda stops working. And that's what's going on right now. We have reached a watershed moment in the history of the United States of America, where the American people are all of a sudden, they're awake. They know they've been lied to. And they're angry. They were made fools of over and over and over again by a government they thought they could trust and a corporate media they thought they could trust. And right now, government and the corporate media are in a full court press trying to reassert control, to take back the minds of America. And it's even way past whether we go into Syria or not. It's just proving to themselves they're still in control. They're desperate to do that. The corporate media needs to sell you this war, because if they can't, all those big money donors that are supporting their huge corporate structure and these multi-million-dollar salary talking heads, that's going to go away. Rand Corporation has come out saying that bombing Syria will be ineffective at accomplishing anything relative to the chemical weapons, because they can't bomb the chemical weapons without setting them off and poisoning all kinds of people. And they say there is a risk that attacking Syria will trigger a wide regional war, but what Rand Corporation doesn't seem to recognize is that is exactly what Israel and the Obama administration want. They understand they can't just go into Syria, take it over, wait a few months, everybody will calm down, then they can gin up more lies about Iran's nuclear weapons and invade there. They're going to have to go for it all right now. We're down to the wire. They're either going to get their global war or not. So, Turkish Prime Minister Erdogan is saying limited action against Syria isn't enough. We have to go in like Kosovo. They have to take out Assad. Now, the opposition in Turkey is already adamantly against any involvement in Syria by anybody. They understand, because Turkey has been sending in these hired mercenaries and weapons across that border, that escalation of Syria is going to leak back over into Turkey itself. And so Erdogan may find opposition against him, which has been severe. A lot of protests over there being brutally put down. Erdogan could find his own job on the line. Russia is boosting their Mediterranean flotilla. They're sending in more and more ships. They've sent in 2 marine carrying ships. It's their equivalent of the USS San Antonio, which is on station off the coast of Syria. And remember, when Obama first came out with, I promise you, no boots on the ground, the first question we ask is, why do you have a marine assault ship there if you're not planning on putting those Marines in country? And, of course, now we have John McCain saying that he will not vote for any Senate resolution that does not allow the option of troops on the ground. We've got Kerry saying we can't rule it out. They're already trying to weasel word and spin this thing up away from a limited strike to punish for chemical weapons into, yeah, we got to invade the place. You know, because the rebels, they've got chemical weapons. We've got to get all the chemical weapons from all these people. Well, you shouldn't have been selling them to them or giving them to them all along. The U.S. government created the crisis in Syria so they could turn around and say, oh, we have to go on in and settle. It's like, you know, a fireman who loves putting out fires, and they're running enough fires around, and he goes and he lights a few so he can prove what a great firefighter he is. And by the way, that's actually happened occasionally, where they'll find an arsonist and find out it's actually a firefighter wanting to look heroic or protect the budget from austerity. Now, we're getting a story from a couple of different places. This was over at Investment Watch blog, and this is a very important story to talk about, saying that Russia is selling some of their most advanced weapons to Syria right now, and they are delivering them. We've already talked about the S-300 air defense system, but the 2 that we need to be very concerned about are called the Sunburn and the Yakonts. These are Russia's latest generation anti-ship cruise missiles. They are supersonic, and they are maneuverable in what's called the terminal phase, which means closing in on the target. The Yakonts especially flies at Mach 2.8, and its radar is sophisticated enough to look at a carrier battle group and figure out which one is the carrier. And, of course, that's what it's going to go for. Now, the Aegis missile defense system and the Phalanx close-in weapon systems operate on the principle of a ballistic track that can be predicted and intercepted. Same thing with America's ballistic missile defense. And Russia, which can't or doesn't want to spend as much money on their weapons as the U.S. does, isn't playing the game of matching the U.S. for ship, plane for plane, tank for tank. They're developing weapons specifically designed to destroy America's military advantage. And these missiles, the Sunburn and the Yakonts, don't follow a ballistic straight line path. They zigzag back and forth, they corkscrew, they weave around. The same thing with their latest generation nuclear warheads, which means a ballistic prediction is impossible. And the Yakontz especially is flying way too fast for the computers on board the Phalanx to keep up with it. Remember what I said before. The fact that the United States is spending far more money on weapons does not guarantee us a qualitative edge. When you look at boondoggles like the Bradley infantry fighting vehicle, the F-22, which is still asphyxiating its pilots, the F-35, which cost more than the gross domestic product of Australia to develop, and it's a complete failure to the point where the Pentagon is thinking about pulling the plug on the whole thing. Can't fly in the rain, can't fly in the fog, can't fly near thunder showers, can't land on a carrier, can't turn as fast as it was supposed to, lousy visibility to the rear if it gets in a dogfight, it's a sitting duck. Russia is spending less money than the United States, but they're spending it smart. If the U.S. gets into a war with Russia, we could see our much vaunted carrier force decimated. The Yakontz apparently costs far less than a single fighter jet. And as I said, its radar is sophisticated enough to seek out and destroy a carrier in the middle of its carrier battle group. We're on the edge here, people. We are on the edge. Got to take a break for commercials. America, welcome back to the show here, and we're getting all these conflicting stories coming in because I was about to put up a story, this was in USA Today, saying that objections were going to delay the Senate Foreign Relations Committee on the Syrian resolution over the issue about whether or not there was going to be a time limit and a ban on ground forces, but Fox News is now running a lower third, saying the Foreign Relations Committee has approved a resolution giving Obama authority to use force against Syria. Now, they're spinning this that this represents congressional approval, but it does not. This is just a committee, and it still has to go to the full Senate, and the same thing has to happen in the House. But they're trying very hard to sell this, that this represents the approval of the entire U.S. Congress for war against Syria. And we're going to be keeping an eye on that and find out whether the resolution that was approved did have an open-ended time frame and boots on the ground, or if they stuck by their guns and said 90 days maximum and no troops on the ground. We're going to have to keep an eye on that. But we're getting all these mixed signals coming in on this thing. And again, the people who want the war, they are fighting dirty. These are people who, by definition, are willing to throw millions of human lives away to put more cash in their own pocket. There is nothing they will not do to get this war. And again, look what Israel tried to do yesterday. They tried to spook Assad into an overt military act. All righty, let's see. We have a caller on the line, Scott in Wisconsin. Aloha, Scott. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mikey. How you doing there, brother? I caught your thing Friday when sorry to hear about the guy. You had to cut out early in that. But, you know, Mike, you're exactly right. You know, Mike, here's the thing. The old record player today. This is, if people, since 2008, with that LimeWire scandal and all this, if you're not woke up right now, that is pretty sad. But, you know, I can confirm with you, like you were just mentioning before the break, there is at least 3 or 4 fighter jets that Assad has. And you're exactly right. He has at least 2 to 4 top. These ain't scuds like Saddam. These are precise missiles, like you were saying, that can go and hit their target. So there's no question they're going to play the puppet up and down, Mike, like you were saying, the mixed signals and all through that. But when it all clears away, this is the same repeating thing of Iraq and the other wars.
That's right, it is. It's a complete replay. It's a complete replay, and the federal government actually thinks the American people are stupid enough to fall for the same thing twice in a row. 3 times if you consider it was the same thing they did in Libya. I mean, it's the same thing they play over and over and over again, and they actually thought this was going to fly.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is we gotta be prepared. I know that you're calling for a situation for money, but this is so important for you guys to stay on the air for these last people that are siding on the sidewalk that hasn't woke up yet. But I do totally agree with you, Brother Mike, that America is waking up. I had a chance to talk. I was heading out of a drugstore this last week with a gentleman that was retiree military guy. He had a 9mm cap on. And we sat there for about a half hour talking about the situation from the economy and that. And he was really fed up. I mean, from where he was back then. And I said, I'm so thankful to run into a person like that, to be able to communicate with you and have that knowledge, because there's a lot of people that still look at you and think you're a Looney Tune. So,
well, they're getting fewer and farther between here, man. I got a lot of emails from people all the time saying, boy, 20 years ago when you said this is the way the country was heading, we all thought you were nuts, and it turns out you were right. We still think you're nuts, but you were right. And I think along with, and yes, we are grateful for all of your financial support, and we desperately need it, but the other part of it is, all of you listening to the show, you need to reach out to people who aren't listening to Republic Broadcasting. You need to steer them here. You need to steer them to whatreallyhappened.com. And more importantly, you just need to talk to them about what's going on and the sheer absurdity of this claim that Assad used chemical weapons on women and children right in front of the UN inspectors, and just how complete nonsense that is. And you need to get out there and just be as visible as you can. We can't have a silent majority out there, as Richard Nixon used to say. You have to be very, very noisy. Now, to catch up, I've been watching the feed over here, and apparently what the House Foreign Relations Committee passed was the original resolution with a 90-day limit and no boots on the ground, and they're doing huzzah, huzzah, this is all over the place. But even they are saying they're going to come back and meet again to talk about the amendments to the resolution being proposed by John McCain and Lindsey Graham, which are, of course, open-ended war and boots on the ground. So they're basically trying to sell the idea that this committee passed the resolution and therefore Congress is in lockstep with the White House, and that is most assuredly not the case. But that's the spin that we're getting out of this thing. Do you have anything else, Scott? I guess Scott hung up. All right. Moving right along. Now, interestingly enough, we're getting a story. This is out of CBC up in Canada, how the Special Prosecutor's Office looking into Nazi war crimes is bringing trials against dozens of alleged former Auschwitz guards. 70 years after the end of the Second World War. And you know when they start wagging the Nazis at you, it means Israel's about ready to really kick off something ugly, like they tried to do yesterday with the missiles. So they're wagging the Nazis at us. You've got Obama trying to link himself with that Swedish diplomat who helped the Jews escape. Kerry is out there saying, oh, Assad is engaging in a new Holocaust. They're just ramping that up. And that just advertises for you that all of their political support for this thing is coming from AIPAC and the Israel Firsters. Only they don't want you thinking about that. That's why the New York Times was editing their story about AIPAC being the 800-pound gorilla in the room pushing for war with Syria. Now, if Obama thought the war was going to make us forget all about all the other scandals, he is sadly mistaken. Sadly, sadly mistaken. Brazil has now demanded that the White House provide a written explanation for NSA spying in Brazil, specifically on the president of Brazil, and they want it by the end of this week. So that's not going away. Apparently, it turns out the DEA is doing even more monitoring of innocent Americans' phone calls than the NSA has been doing. All of it a violation of the Fourth Amendment. The government has no business peeking into your business until they have proof you are engaging in criminal activity. They can't just look in just in case. That is unconstitutional. And the very fact that we have so many of these federal government agencies, NSA, DEA, FBI, DOJ, doing this only underscores the fact that this is an illegitimate government. It is not legal. That Constitution is the original contract with America. It is the rules under which we, the people, allow this government to manage this nation for the benefit of the nation and for the benefit of we, the people. And when the government does not abide by those rules, when they are on a clear path of simply looting this nation to play games on Wall Street, games with war across the face of the globe, money for Israel. It is obvious this is not a legal or legitimate government any longer. We are a nation without a legitimate government at this time. We all have to come to grips with that. Now, of course, something else I'm sure that Obama was hoping the war was going to erase from our memory is we're coming up on another anniversary of the 9/11 false flag attack that kicked off this decade of U.S. aggression across the globe. And the Rethink 9/11 campaign is out there. They've got ads on BART trains and buses. I think they've even got a blimp up there now. And if you go over to their website, and we've got a link from whatreallyhappened.com, they've got all kinds of brochures and flyers that you can print up and hand out. And now is the time for a real push on this, and I'll tell you why. Because Obama's bovine excrement excuse for war with Syria has created a wonderful opportunity for we, the American people. Even the most die-hard, in-denial American, desperately clinging to the reassuring image of a kind and benevolent government that would never lie to the people, just had a bucket of ice water thrown into their face. And they're waking up and realizing, yeah, it's inescapable. The U.S. government is lying to us, and rather clumsily at that. And now they are far more receptive than ever before to the possibility the U.S. government has lied to them about other things. Torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin, the ratification of the 16th Amendment, Saddam's nuclear weapons. And so this is an opportunity for those of you to get your information about 9/11, get it together, and share it with everybody you know, especially people not on the net, not on the blogs, not on the independent media. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And as I mentioned earlier in the program, RBN is again engaged in a fundraising drive to just cover the cost of getting the message out there. We have to stand up to these warmongers. If we don't choose to fight against these people now, we will soon have no choice but to fight for them from now on. And if we, the people, are going to be forced into some kind of a war, it is our inalienable right to decide for ourselves who the enemy of the Republic really is, and I don't think it's Syria. So we're going to play another recording for you. This one is from Andy Hoffman. And I guess, do we have that recording queued?
Yes.
There we go.
Hi, this is Andy Hoffman at MilesFranklin.com, one of the largest bullion dealers in America. I just want to emphasize that people should donate in the current pledge drive to Republic Broadcasting Network. I think it's a fantastic alternative media solution for people, and it's free. Please go to the website, republicbroadcasting.org, where you can donate by credit card or PayPal, and their address is there, too, if you want to mail it in. Thanks so much. I look forward to participating in the network for years to come.
All right, and that was Andy Hoffman. And we really need it right now. I can't put it any more plainly than that. All the big money, they're throwing their money into trying to sell this war because it's going to make them richer, and they don't care how many of your kids are going to get killed. They don't. It's not a factor. It's absolutely not a factor. The only one who is going to stop this rush to war is we, the people, meaning all of you, in every way that you can help. Not just the donations, but just flood your congressional offices with your opposition any way that you can. Alrighty, let's see. Phone lines are open. 800-313-9443, 800-313-9443, coming up on the top of the hour. Getting some more information about the House Foreign Relations Committee passing that resolution. It is the original limited resolution. 90-day maximum time limit for strikes, no boots on the ground, but we're already hearing that they're going to come back into another meeting and try and get these amendments right through. We're already hearing that the Senate version of the resolution is just going to be sent directly to the House of Representatives. They're not even going to bother coming up with their own. They're just trying to railroad this thing through as fast as they can. And the only way we'll stop it. We know that the Senate is probably going to vote for this war resolution because they're all the richest members of Congress, and they're all tied up, their investments are tied up with Raytheon and all these other companies. So we have to make our stand against this in the House of Representatives. If, in fact, Israel even allows the situation to go to a vote of the full Congress. They may not want to take the chance. Everybody was guessing wrong about Parliament supporting a war with Syria. Huge embarrassment for David Cameron. And they may not let it go that long. saw this story coming out of the British media yesterday where Parliament will not entertain another vote on the Syrian situation unless there is a significant change in the situation. They're almost telegraphing that there's going to be some kind of a false flag somewhere to get this thing going. Turning to the economy here, interesting story over at MarketWatch.com. They're pretty reliable people, saying basically you're a sucker to believe Wall Street's current mantra that another Lehman Brothers-like collapse is not in the cards. Of course it is. Wall Street is literally on life support from the Federal Reserve to the tune of $85 billion a month to keep the most holy ledger with black ink at the bottom. There's all this talk about tapering off quantitative easing. They can't. They're hooked on it now, like a heroin addict. Got to pump that cash in to keep things looking good. And that's another reason they're so desperate to get this war going. By the way, I went over to the websites for the World Bank and the IMF, and I took a look at Syria, and by golly, Syria doesn't owe any money to the IMF or the World Bank. Well, there's a reason to invade, to plunge them back into debt, to the private central banks. That's what this is all about. Shoving the world back into debt to the private central bankers through war and blood, because nothing gets the borrowing going like being in a war. And that's what they're trying to do here. As I mentioned earlier, the U.S. July trade deficit up 13% to $39.1 billion. And that's per month. We're talking $1 billion a day going out of this country to buy exports for which we are not selling any products that anybody wants to buy. U.S. trade deficits with China and the European Union at record highs. It's all hanging on the edge of collapse. And that is why they are desperate to get this global war going, to force the world back onto Bretton Woods and the petrodollar, because Wall Street and the U.S. government got dependent on that, bringing wealth to this country without having to work for it. We don't need to borrow their manufacturing products anymore. The whole world has to go through the dollar, and we'll loan them all the dollars they want at interest. Same scam the Federal Reserve did to the American taxpayer, Bretton Woods did to the rest of planet Earth. Now, the Walmart workers, who along with the fast food workers are fed up with hard work weeks and no money for it, are getting ready for another walkout. Biggest mobilization since Black Friday, which was last November. And remember, I think we were talking about, I think it was on Monday, how somebody was pointing out how you can get more money going on welfare in many states than by taking a minimum wage job. And, of course, the obvious answer to ordinary people is let's raise the minimum wage so we incentivize people going back to work. But, of course, what we're hearing from the money junkies in Washington, D.C. is, oh, we got to cut welfare. It's too expensive. We're on a wartime economy. They don't want to admit it. That's why we have McCain and Lindsey Graham are ready to vote for an open-ended multi-billion-dollar war in Syria, but they voted down aid for the Hurricane Sandy victims because it was too expensive. Because it's just, those American taxpayers, they're too greedy. They don't understand. They're supposed to give us money that we will use to reshape the world for the benefit of the private central bankers. Yeah, we understand just fine that's what's going on. Another very interesting little story, and I think we mentioned about it before. This is over at libertycrier.com. What is government? And apparently part of this Common Core curriculum in the schools is that they're teaching elementary school students that government is their family. Not their mother, not their father. The government is their family, and that they should trust the family to set the best rules and everything. And we've seen this before. The Nazis used the same thing. That's where they got that whole, the fatherland this and the fatherland that. Forget about what your parents are saying. We, the government, stand in loco parentis, and we'll tell you what to think. I swear, over in Washington, D.C., they're reading that little book, Dictatorship for Dummies by Adolf Hitler, because they're just following that blueprint step by step by step by step. Now, a lot of times we've been talking about the dangers of prescription antidepressants, SSRIs. And I've been basically giving you the statistic that 1 out of every 10 Americans are on these very dangerous medications, including presumably the police force and members of the U.S. government. And we know these medications can, in certain individuals, trigger extreme acts of violence, rage, suicide. And apparently, my statistic was out of date because the latest numbers are that 20% of Americans regularly take these prescription mind-altering medications. That's 1 out of every 5 people. And I would presume that the ratio is probably higher within the U.S. government because it's a very, very, very stressful job to try and sell a world war to a war-weary people. And that may explain some of the poor quality thinking we're seeing coming out of Washington, D.C., like this idea that we were actually going to believe Assad used chemical weapons on women and children in front of the UN chemical weapons inspectors. Somebody actually thought that was going to fly. And I think in the blueprint for the new America, we need to basically say, if you're going to have a zero-tolerance drug policy, it's got to start with the leadership. We cannot allow people in positions of power and authority, especially when they've got the keys to the nuclear weapons, to be on these medications. We just can't. All right, we're going to take a break for Phyllis Schlafly and some commercials. Be back with hour number 3. Phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Please donate to Republic Broadcasting. We're in the fight for the future of America. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to grab a phone call here. Kathy in Massachusetts. Aloha, Kathy. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
What's on my mind? I had to call when I heard you refer to the study showing people depending on the system earn more money than if they work.
In some states, not all.
Wages, it's the unaffordable benefit. When I lived in Seattle, I took a job for $10 an hour with my college degree. My benefit, just a premium, $3 something a month, just the copays for type 1 diabetic, basic or rudimentary RXs, were more than my take-home wage. I would have been ineligible for food stamps over the income limit because they don't consider the cost of this exorbitant health care here.
Okay, Kathy, Kathy, I was not chastising people on welfare. My point was that, there are people who need to be on welfare, and I'm not challenging that. I was responding to this complaint that we were getting from people that welfare was more attractive than a minimum wage job, and my response would be, let's raise the minimum wage so people can afford to pay for their medical care, pay for food, pay for homes, but what we're hearing from the people in government is, oh no, we've got to reduce welfare payments even more because we've got a war to fight here. And I'm not on the case of people who have to be on welfare. Yes, there are people who do take advantage of it, but most Americans, I think, who are on food stamps and welfare would just as soon not be there if there were jobs for them to go to that would allow them to pay the high costs of living in the society.
Absolutely. May I say this? I don't drink, smoke, or do drugs. I have a stellar credit score, stellar character references, and I'm sitting on a bus. I can hardly hear you. And the gal sitting next to me, we've been laughing. I said, help me figure this out, how to say it just right. No, I don't want to be dependent on the system, but it would kill me if I were not, because of the gross profiteering of the medical industrial complex. Many of us in this system, when we get treated like brick-brass.
Well, the government wants you dependent. The government wants everybody dependent. That's why we've got 47% of Americans are on food stamps right now, because if you're dependent on the government to eat, then you're not going to stand up and say, no, you may not take my child for the invasion of Syria. That's what they're planning on.
No, though, Michael, I disagree even with that. There are many of us in this system that are pushing back. We aren't just lazy. We do push back.
I'm not saying you're lazy. I'm not saying the government is pushing that. I don't agree with it.
No, I can remember I'm on a bus. I can hardly hear you.
Okay, well, Kathy, listen to me. Every week, my wife and I are involved with this food distribution program where we go down and, we buy all this stuff that we can at the closeout, clearance stores, and we go down, we hand it out. And yes, there are a few people, a tiny percentage, single digit, who are there simply milking the system for whatever they can get. But the vast majority of people that we're handing food to are just like you, college educated, played by the rules, did what they were told to do, and they just got absolutely slammed from Wall Street's money junkie gambling casino, because Wall Street has this myth that they're making money and it doesn't hurt anybody when they cheat, but of course that's nonsense. For one person to win a financial transaction, somebody else has to lose, and the losses and the costs get transferred down to the people. Kathy, you're breaking up now. I'm going to let you go and switch over to Thomas in San Francisco. Thomas, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha.
Aloha, Nui Nui.
Hey, tell you what, I'm part of your Rangers, and I followed your orders, sir. I called up some Congress critters and some senators and told them what I thought. And, I didn't do as much as I could, but I did something. I wish all the people that are listening to this broadcast now can do at least something.
Oh, they have to. They have to. You can't sit this one out, or we're going to lose this whole thing, and we're going to be in this global war to shove us all back down into another century of debt to these private central bankers. You can't be silent. If you're silent, you're part of the problem. You got to get out there. And thank you for calling yesterday. Call again tomorrow. Just keep it going over and over and over again. This is no time for halfway measures. This is look at the full court press they're doing to sell you this war. We have to push back just as hard, just as loud, just as often, just as steady as they are. And we have to just fight this right on down to the end, because we really are at that point. We're either going to have this global war the bankers want, or we're not. And we're at that edge. There's no other possible course into the future right now.
Michael, you still there?
Yes.
Oh, great. I would like to say to your listeners, you don't have to agree with Michael on every issue. I don't agree with Michael with the what hit the Pentagon, but we can agree to disagree. But this is not the time for that. The thing is, war is looming, and we need to tell these Congress critters, the way that we feel. Even if they're not going to listen to us, we'll let them know that if you're not going to listen to us, well, they're all, we'll deal with you somehow. Anyway, Michael, thank you so kindly for what you're doing. You're a very intelligent man, and just keep on going, my brother.
As long as I can, I will keep on going as long as I can. And by the way, something else we need to be aware of, no doubt the powers that are behind the scenes are already calling up members of the House of Representatives. Don't worry about the voters. We got the die-bowl machines. We'll make sure you win if you vote for war. And so we're going to, but again, it's a question of numbers. It's like AIPAC going out and saying, we'll give you the money to win. They can do that here and there. They don't have the money to buy the election in 435 districts. And the vote riggers, if they try and steal the elections in all 435 districts to support their war hawks, that's just going to be really too obvious. We may not even get to next year's elections the way things are going. It just feels to me like we're on the edge of just the whole thing falling apart there. We're going to switch over here to George in Texas. Aloha, George. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
How you doing, Mike? Here's a message to all them Russia bashers out there. The thing is, I was sitting reading the press last night, the Russian press. And the position the Russian government has taken, they're not holding this against the American people. They're holding this just against the government, because they're even saying the American people have lost control of this government.
Well,
and
that's a message that we need to get out there. We, the American people, don't support this government. We don't think this government's legitimate any longer. It's gone completely rogue. It's off the reservation of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. It's just a bunch of very rich people that want to start a war because it'll make them even richer. That's really what it comes down to.
Well, I was sitting there hearing about the secret movable transporting of nuclear warheads.
Yeah, that's a very alarming story. Now, I'm not sure how much credence to give it. We know that there's at least one unaccounted for nuclear weapon inside the United States left over from that strange bomber flight from, I think it was Minot Air Base, and it left with 6 armed nuclear cruise missiles on the pylons and arrived with only 5. But again, at this point, these war hawks are desperate to get this war going, and if it looks like Congress might actually vote this war resolution down, that I don't think either Israel or the Obama administration is going to let it go to a congressional vote down. And I think they're going to try and do something to get this thing going, meaning a false flag attack. I think Israel tried to do that yesterday with these missiles towards Syria. They were trying to spook Assad into an overt military act. They're not going to give up just because that failed. Israel could very easily sneak one of their Dolphin-class submarines up near the shore of Syria and flip off one of their cruise missiles into the U.S. fleet and say, oh, look, Syria did it. They could even use a nuclear-tipped cruise missile and say, oh, Iran obviously gave Syria the nuclear weapon, and they're off and running. We should not put anything past these people, including setting off a nuclear bomb inside the United States of America.
Well, I got called Senator Ted Cruz, and I told him about this story, and they seemed kind of concerned. So I would sit there and encourage everybody, call your senators and congressmen and tell them not only stop voting against this war, but we want an accounting of all our nuclear warheads.
Well, I'd like an accounting of all of the gold in Fort Knox and the New York Federal Reserve to go along with that. I mean, this is a completely unaccountable government. And again, and I know it sounds wacko, conspiracy, paranoid situation, but these people are desperate to move this war forward. It's an all-or-nothing deal, and we should not presume that there is something so evil they wouldn't do it. Yeah, they'll do it. If it works, they'll do it. Got to take a break for commercials. Back with more phone calls after these words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go back to the phones here. Curtis in Florida. Aloha, Curtis. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind tonight?
Aloha, Michael. It's always an honor to talk to you. You're one of my top 2 favorite radio hosts, and you just bat a thousand all the time. You're fantastic on the issues. I'm so glad that you're against this ridiculous 4th or 5th war. I've lost count. Keep hitting, Michael. The only thing that I would disagree, and I agree with you on 99% of what you say, so why go to the 2%? Well, I guess that's what teachers and critics do. But as far as the minimum wage, that's really treating the symptoms. Our economic system called capitalism is evil. The federal government should not pilfer and squander the land trust of the people into disproportionate private hands. We deserve equal land at the first of each month, or a land credit commencing on your 18th birthday, 40 acres a mule, minus 4/10.
Okay, hang on, Curtis, for a second. First of all, in theory, I agree with you, okay? But the discussion about minimum wage versus welfare was handled in the context of what Americans need to live on, and how silly it is to try and solve all the government's economic problems with you must make do with less so we can have more, even as they're getting ready to throw more taxes at us through Obamacare and the rest of it. Second of all, at the moment, I think fundamental structural changes to our nation are going to be a tough sell going through this turmoil. And that's why I say that when we talk about the blueprint for the new America, that we choose as its foundation the existing Constitution with a few modifications. We obviously don't need the Electoral College any longer, and the first 13 amendments. Because getting people to sort of wake up to the point where they're ready to say, yeah, this government has to go, and then selling them a whole new complete social political structure, that's going to be kind of tough. People are going to want to go to what they're familiar with. And so we really do need to stay in the context of restoring the original republic, which allowed people to prosper through their own labor, rather than being simply staked out naked on the ground to be plundered and looted and, let's be honest, raped by the will of the money junkies. Okay?
Yeah, that begins with equal land, though. That begins with an equal footing. You are naked and plundered when you don't start with equal land.
Well, you know, oddly enough, when the Declaration of Independence was written, they actually did have that concept in there. It was supposed to be life, liberty, and property, but that one got taken out at the last minute and replaced with,
that's too bad.
Right, you know, a pursuit of happiness, which is a very vague term that I think it was the only thing they could fit in there on the tape-up that they were doing on that thing, or the paste-up. But again, you know, the American dream really has pretty much vanished. Private property ownership is going away, and of course, that's what the money junkies want. They want to own it all, and we spend our lives paying rents and living by leave of their lordships. And they're trying to take us back to the 17th, 16th century. We don't want to go there. This is the 21st century. What I think is more important than equal access to land is equal access to the policy of the nation. And we live in an age where direct participatory democracy is going to be technologically possible, so that our new government is a caretaker and they are left to themselves to take care of the roads and the bridges and the schools and the hospitals. But major issues of national policy, like looting the people to prop up Wall Street and going to war, can and should be put to a direct popular vote of the entire population. And that way we wouldn't have all these people like Israel coming in with their bribes and blackmail telling Congress, yeah, go ahead, go to war in Syria. It's not your kids who are going to die in it. Come on.
Michael, I agree on getting rid of representation of government is a fraud on many levels. First past the post is a fraud. Winner take all is a fraud. They don't vote John McCain is a fraud. Bill the damn Fitz is a fraud.
I understand that. Listen, we're running out of time. I've got a couple more calls I got to get to, but let me just finish by saying this. We're heading into a period of tremendous social upheaval, and the goal of planning a new government for this nation will be to disrupt as little as possible going from here to there, and that is also a lesson that we learned from the collapse of the Soviet Union, where the Russian Republic tried to maintain as much of what was familiar and comfortable and beneficial as possible. And so this idea that we're going to burn it all down to the ground and rebuild from scratch, that's a non-starter right from the beginning. What we do need to burn down to the ground and start from scratch are those private central banks and go back to a government-issued currency that does not accrue interest to private bankers as it powers commerce. So Curtis, going to let you go, switch over to Jared in North Washington. Aloha, Jared. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Michael, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. I'm angry. I'm pissed off. I'm furious.
I'm angry too. I just want to let you know that I've taken your call for action. I've contacted all my representatives, Senate, the White House, Boehner's office, and my family did so too. So we're getting out there and doing it.
Excellent, excellent. Now get all your friends and coworkers to do the same thing.
They're up next, absolutely.
All right, good.
I do have some kind of suggestions on how we can approach this Syria issue. I think that we need to clearly identify the people who are anti-war, who are pro-liberty, in a wider banner. Instead of calling them patriots or Tea Party or liberal, we are all for peace. We are the peaceful resistance organization.
We're Americans. We're Americans. Look at the poll numbers regarding war in Syria. Those of us opposed to it, we are Americans. We don't need any other labels than that. And the message we need to be sending to the government as a whole is, we have no more money to give you for wars. We have no more children we will give you for wars. Stop, stop, stop. That's the message.
Up against the corporate-owned network. They're the con. So we need to get out there, and we should be protesting en masse now, not necessarily in front of only our congressional offices, but in front of the White House, all the Federal Reserve locations in this country.
Yeah, definitely against them. Let them know that we know that, you know, they have a vested financial motive in wanting this war to go forward, because it's the only way they can fix this collapsing Ponzi scheme, banking scam that they've been running.
Absolutely. We need to identify those that are truly culpable. And that's the Federal Reserve, those military-industrial corporations, Wall Street, White House. Get out there and protest in front of those organizations. And we, the people, we should concurrently be beginning en masse a viral video campaign, you know, to build upon the hashtag I didn't join operation and make it from the citizens. And we send these videos to the leadership of Syria and China and Russia and Iran and the UN.
Okay, but we need to put a focus on people who are not on Twitter or not on Facebook or not listening to Republic Broadcasting or not reading whatreallyhappened.com. All of those people already know this thing is nonsense. We need to start reaching the friends and neighbors who aren't paying attention to the online world. They may not be computer literate, so you need to hard copy all this stuff, make up your own little pamphlets and start handing them around, because the people who are already online in the independent media, they're already convinced. We don't need to convince them anymore. We need an outreach program to reach those people who are still dependent on that corporate media. They're a dwindling minority. We've got a bigger audience at whatreallyhappened.com than CNBC does right now. But we need to reach all those people around us who are not plugged into the net and the independent media and just share with them how incredibly absurd and wrong all of this is.
Yes, and I think if we reached out and made some videos saying that we don't approve to the leadership of Russia, China, Iran, and the UN en masse, that sends a message to the world that the people don't want this war, and that those countries can use that against our own Obama regime as they're continually moving forward unilaterally without congressional approval. And I have a question for you, Mike. If this regime moves forward unilaterally without congressional approval, how long do you think it would be before strikes begin, in your opinion? Thank you.
That is a very, very difficult question to answer. And frankly, you know, given that this is an illegitimate government, I don't care if Congress does approve the war in Syria. That's not going to convince me that it's a good thing. I don't care what Congress votes. This war is wrong. It is based on lies, period, end of discussion. We've got to take a break for commercials. Back with more phone calls after these words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And it seems I may have misspoken because I'm getting some additional updates on the resolution that was passed by the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. And remember, that is not a vote by the full Senate. It doesn't constitute congressional approval, although the corporate media is trying to spin it that way. And apparently the resolution that was finally voted on by 10-7, hardly a mandate, the language is so broad that it can be interpreted as allowing boots on the ground. So we know where they're going with this. They're not voting for a limited strike. They're voting for all-out war on another country that has not attacked the United States of America. And this nation is bankrupt. And McCain and Lindsey Graham are out there saying, yes, we're ready to spend billions and billions of other people's money to go for this war in Syria. No problem. The private central bankers will loan us all the cash we need to fight these wars. And then the American people will be spending the next 4 generations paying it all back. That's what the scam is all about. Bankers love wars. Wars are the bankers' richest harvest. They have played this trick on us twice now. And they're going for the 3rd time. 3rd time's the charm there. Before the Federal Reserve was created, there was no such thing as a world war, and we're into big mistake number 3, and they're pushing as hard as they can. And the Senate is probably going to go along with this nonsense. They're just going to send this broadly worded, open-ended bill over to the House. It's going to go to the floor there. The last chance we have to fight this war, working within the system, is for all of you to keep up the pressure on members of the House of Representatives and simply say, we don't care how much vote fraud you've got, how much money you're getting from AIPAC. If you vote for this war, we will mobilize our entire community to bring a landslide against you next election. And then you're going to have to go out and get a real job. And that's a challenge in this economy, especially for a permanent governing class that doesn't actually know how to do anything except talk and make up new laws. All right, we're going to grab a few more phone calls here. Bob in Las Vegas. Aloha, Bob. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. I wrote something a while ago, and I like to do open mics, and, that's how I like to spread my message, and if I could share it with the audience, I appreciate that.
Okay. How long is this going to be? Because we're running out of time. We've got a bunch of callers.
Real quick.
Okay.
It's just a little... All right. Ready? Common sense ain't common like the reason we're bombing innocent civilians, killing by the millions at the same time, spending billions and billions and the villains in Congress who ain't honest, rubber stamp bills to kill. Like George Carlin said, carrots be dangling, politicians' pockets be jangling, and our lives are wasting away. What do you got to say? How's that hope and change? That's it.
That'd make a great rap song. Would you email that to me? I'm going to see if I can do something with that. And Bob, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Trish in New York. Trish, thank you for waiting. What's on your mind?
Oh, yes. I just wanted to address what you're saying about the mainstream media and their push for war. I'm a freelance journalist at the United Nations, and I have been trying to ask questions that go against what the administration has been pumping as far as, weapons of mass destruction in Syria and who is behind it, and it is really difficult over there. And we have other journalists, mainstream media journalists. I don't know if these are Operation Mockingbird type journalists, but
probably all of them. Probably all of them. CIA's been running that since the end of World War II. I ran into those bozos over at CBS Television City.
Yeah, that will jump in and interrupt your questions and keep you from asking, questions I tried to ask about the report from Huta, from the reporter that, among other places, he said that he reports for AP, though it was not itself an AP story. Mm-hmm. I got harassment after the press conference ended, and this is a place that you have to understand. Several months ago, the member state of Qatar hosted Judith Miller to give a briefing. That's how far out some of this is. Judith Miller of Iraqi WMD fame.
Yes.
Was hosted at the UN to speak and give her expertise by the state of Qatar. So, if you want to protest and if you want to address what's going on right now, maybe people need to start also addressing the media.
I would agree with that absolutely wholeheartedly. Might be a good place to stand and glare at them as well and just have signs that say, we know you're lying. We know you are lying to the American people and the world. The whole system is corrupted top to bottom. And
stick with the sites that, you vote with your click, and, stick with the sites that give an alternative story or that question. I mean, I am certainly no weapons expert. I don't know who used the weapons of mass destruction over there, but I don't hear the questions being asked of Syria also being asked to the other side, and they need to be asked equally of both sides. And they seem to be targeted in one direction to take down one certain government, and that, to me, is not journalism. So, just thought I would check in and let you know.
Well, thank you, and I'm not surprised, especially at some place like the United Nations. Anybody who's there in the press corps, it's pretty much a given from the corporate networks. They're all controlled. They're all given their marching orders. They're very well-paid people, and they show up and they say, make this point, ask this question, feed this softball to the people so they can get the propaganda out. And we know that's how it all works, and they're just trying as hard as they can. They're pulling out all the stops to sell this war in Syria, and it won't just be Syria. Because looking at this huge global outcry against this latest war based on a lie, they have to understand they can't go into Syria, wait a few months and expect people to calm down, and then march into Iran. They're going to find some way to get this going all the way. It started out limited strike on Syria. Now they're openly saying, no, we're going to have boots on the ground, going to have to be a complete outright invasion. They're pushing this thing forward as hard as they can, and we must push back.
I think I might have even gotten off your site about the Bush administration official that says the text could be interpreted to go on and do domino strikes against Lebanon and Iran right in the text. I think people need to really pay attention to this because the implications are bigger than the Iraq War in 2003.
Okay, so this is the Senate resolution that was just passed. Actually has open-ended language that says they can go into other countries.
Well, according to this Bush administration official, a guy by the name of Jack Goldsmith, he's a Harvard law professor, and he claimed that the focus is on the Syrian WMD, but it's so broad that it could be used to attack Lebanon and Iran because it doesn't have specific enough limits on the targets. So
okay,
I don't know if people are watching
I haven't seen the text yet. I'm going to have to look at it. Again, I expect the Senate will go along with this thing because the senators all have their investment portfolios in these defense contractors and these financial institutions that stand to have the majority of this new created loaned cash flow to play with. The only chance we have of stopping this is in the House of Representatives, and you've got to focus your efforts there. You really do.
One thing I'm a little surprised about is how quickly they started these hearings, and one of the hypotheses that's kind of floating around is that they jumped into it a week early before Congress comes officially back into session is because they would like to get this out of the way and possibly even start bombing before the UN General Assembly kicks in, because there is very much the UN is not, the feeling at the UN that I got, they are not for this.
Nobody is for this except the money.
Blamed on them, and it wasn't their fault, and they do not want to be, blamed for this one, and so I think that to get it through before the UNGA comes into session on September 22nd, there may be a little bit of a timeline there.
Well, I think one of the reasons the corporate media is trying to spin this resolution in the Senate Foreign Appropriations Committee, they're trying to spin it that this represents congressional approval, and we could see the bombing start even before the full Congress returns on the 9th, rather than risk a possible vote down, because the current polling among members of the House is this is not a done deal by any stretch of the imagination. And again, the wild card is Israel. We know they fired off missiles yesterday, which to me, it looks like they tried to spook Assad into some overt action. If it looks like the House is going to vote this down, I'm expecting Israel to stage a false flag to get this thing going. They are desperate. They're in a panic. Anything they can do. Trish, thank you for the update. We'll be back with more phone calls in the end of the show after these words from our sponsors. I have to put up my master volume here. Aloha. Welcome back. Last segment of our show today. And before we get into the phone calls, we're going to play one more of our little pledge drive clips. This one from Vicki Davis.
Hi, this is Vicki Davis of ChannelingReality.com. Most people on Republic, both hosts and guests, donate their time and energy to bring you real news and information that you don't get on the mainstream media. But it takes money to keep the network on air. So I'm asking you to do your part to keep it going. Go to www.republicbroadcasting.org website and donate today. It's the only way to keep programs like Darren Weeks' Govern America, Dave Hodges' Common Sense Show on the air. If we lose this resource, you'll go back to being a mushroom. And you know what that means. So please, do it now. Donate to RBN today.
All righty, and we're going to go back to the phones now. Alex in Florida. Aloha, Alex. Welcome back to the show. What's on your mind?
Not much, Michael. I just wanted to...
Oh, well then, thank you for the call.
Hey, hello?
Yes, I'm sorry. You're on the air.
Sorry about that. I just wanted to make a mention that in the book, The Fourth Turning, it talks about the event that their hypothetical scenario that could cause us to go into the next revolution would be when the United States attacks Iran. They say that that could cause the youth to stand up and say, no, we don't have anything. We're struggling right now, and here you're wanting to spend trillions of dollars at another war, and that's just a hypothetical.
They're risking war with Russia and China, who are not going to go back to the world of Bretton Woods. And Russia's already said they're going to turn Syria and Iran into new Vietnam, war of attrition, and just grind the United States down until it collapses, which Russia has the resources to do, and the United States does not. And that means somewhere between, if they get this attack in Syria going, somewhere between that point and final capitulation by the United States government, they will resort to their nuclear arsenal. That's why this is so dangerous and why we need everybody listening to this show to call and keep calling their members of the House of Representatives and just say, if you vote for this war resolution, I will work my rear end off to get you defeated in next year's election.
Yeah, but you know what, Michael? They'll be paid off. They don't care. They're paid off. All those people are paid off. They probably have representatives of the military-industrial complex going to them saying, listen, here's, $4 or $5 million. You never have to work again. Just vote for this, and we'll help you get reelected.
That shows us the wisdom of the Founding Fathers when they had the governmental power and authority spread across the entire nation. And again, following the American Civil Wars, when that huge consolidation of federal power began, and it obviously was a huge mistake for the American people. Alex, got to let you go. We're running out of time. We're going to switch over to Fred in Michigan. Aloha, Fred. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Okay. In 1996, a group of people, Richard Pearl, James Covert, Charles Taylor Banks Jr., Douglas Feist, Robert Lowenberg, David and Mayrev Wormser, I presume of the PNAC cabal, they did a paper called A Clean Break, a new strategy for securing the realm.
Yes, that was part of the project for the New American Century.
Israel can shape its strategic environment in cooperation with Turkey and Jordan by weakening, containing, even rolling back Iran, Syria, and Iraq. This effort can initially focus on removing Saddam Hussein from power, an important Israeli strategic objective in its own right. All right? Mm-hmm. Then we have, in 2002, veteran filmmaker James Longley does this documentary Gaza Strip, showing Israeli snipers shooting Palestinian children through the head as they're throwing stones, and Palestinian children being blown up by booby-trapped toys they picked up off the ground. Mm-hmm. It also shows Israeli helicopters dropping canisters of nerve gas on densely densely inhabited areas of the Gaza Strip. Need I say more?
Well, no, you shouldn't. I mean, we've been talking about the Project for the New American Century all along. They were writing these neocon policy papers. And again, the Securing the Realm paper was actually written as a policy paper for Israel, and then all of a sudden it winds up here in the United States of America determining America's foreign policy with regard to Israel. And it's just another reminder that your children are being sent off to horrible death and disfigurement in addition to serving the money junkies and their little debt-based currencies, but because Israel wants it. And the New York Times reported and then deleted that AIPAC is the 800-pound gorilla in the room when it comes to pushing for congressional authorization of this war.
And listen to this. Rabbi Yaakov Perrin, who's presiding at a wake for a fellow by the name of Goldstein, an IDF physician who shot up a mosque in 1990s. Here's what Rabbi Yaakov Perrin says. 1 million Arabs are not worth a Jewish fingernail.
Yeah, I know. There's an attitude there. And whether it's, Israel talking about the worthlessness of non-Israeli lives or the money junkies being willing to send hundreds of millions of people to death in wars to enrich their coffers, it's the same mindset. And it is a reminder that the curse of political power is it attracts the very sort of people who should not be allowed to have it. The founding fathers of this nation tried to diffuse political power to make it less attractive to those kinds of individuals. But money junkies and power freaks and monomaniacs and sociopaths are nothing if not relentless. And we just allowed ourselves to let our nation, our republic, be taken away from us bit by tiny bit. And now they're trying to grab the rest of it. And they're trying to basically balance the books in this failed banking system with yet another world war. We've seen this pattern time and time again. We have to make it stop. The Lone Ranger is not coming to save us. Batman is not coming to save us. The imaginary playmate in the clouds is not going to change anything that's going on. If you want this war stopped, you have to make it stop, and that means calling your representatives over and over and over again. We have to shout down AIPAC. We have to shout down the vote riggers. We have to shout down the military-industrial complex. Because it's our children who are going to be expected to fight and die and bleed in these wars. Not the kids of the members of Congress, not the kids who are, the members of AIPAC or all these wealthy industrial families. They'll always make sure their kids are someplace safe. And they're literally risking a nuclear war with Russia and China. And nobody's going to win that one. So that's how important it is. And I know I keep pounding, and I'm going to keep pounding on this from now until the 9th. And even if Congress comes back and rubber stamps this rush to war, doesn't mean that I have ceded to Congress the right to tell me what I'm going to think, because I know this war is wrong, and I know it's based on a lie. And all Congress can do is make themselves complicit in a war crime with their vote. Okay, Fred, we're going to let you go here. We're almost here at the end of the show. Folks, this is as real as it gets. We are at the brink. We are probably closer to a nuclear war now than we were during the Cuban Missile Crisis. And we know that Washington, D.C. are all poker players. We saw that with John McCain. He was sitting there in the hearing playing poker on his iPhone. That's their mindset, poker, bluff and bluster. And I think it's very, very dangerous that apparently the Obama administration and the congressional leadership are operating on the theory that they can bluff Russia into backing back down on these wars, because Russia did back down during the Cuban Missile Crisis. But it's not the same situation. Russia was not willing to go to nuclear war over little tiny far-off Cuba. But they see that the United States is attempting to reconquer the entire world and force them back onto Bretton Woods. That is far more important an issue than Cuba. And Putin is not Khrushchev, and nobody wants a nuclear war. But the United States has a history of using nuclear weapons of mass destruction on the civilians of other countries. And there's no reason to think they will not do so again, especially if they're losing a conventional war, which they will. We don't have the manufacturing, the manpower, or the money for a prolonged conventional war. Russia is not bluffing when they say they will turn Syria and Iran into a new Vietnam and just wear the U.S. down, because they will. We have to stop this right now. The future of the entire country is going to be decided over the next few weeks, and we need you to get involved. Call your members of the House of Representatives. Start reaching out to those people who are not listening to Republic Broadcasting. Get them to listen. Reach out to those people who are not reading whatreallyhappened.com. Get them to read it. Print out information, hand it to those people who are not using the computer, and start to pry them loose from the corporate media's brainwashing. This is as serious as it gets. We'll be back here tomorrow. Aloha, America.